Today's video is going to be a guide for the almighty Paladin class for Baldur's Gate 3's early access. Now, I will be including all three subclasses, chapter markers below, and we'll talk a little bit about different weapon build potential. Starting off right away in character creation, I want to first point out that all Paladins gain proficiency in all armor types and all weapons, so you can wear and use whatever you want. If you want to focus your build on dealing high damage, then being a strength-based pally that wears heavy armor and wields a two-handed weapon is a fantastic idea. Or if you want to go with a more tanky build using a one-handed weapon and a shield, which will give you a higher armor class at the cost of some damage potential, you can go either strength and use heavy armor, or if you don't mind using a rapier with a shield, as the rapier is the only finesse weapon that can match non-finesse one-handed weapons in damage potential. Being a dexterity paladin wearing medium armor actually offers a quicker path to reaching a higher armor class with your armor alone, much earlier on in early access. At least that's how it is now. If you do want to wear heavy armor, I'm going to give you a quick tip just because it's frustrating in early access because of the lack of heavy armor. If you come to the Goblin Camp or the Ruined Temple of Selûne and talk to this trader right here named Roa, she does sell heavy armor 16. Now, you won't be able to actually get 17 AC until the Grimforge area, which is the end of early access for most players. Now, you don't hear much about dual wielding with a paladin. It's likely partially because at level 2, the paladin does not have access to the two-weapon fighting style, like some of the other martial classes get access to. But don't let that stop you. You can actually deal a ton of damage as a dual-wielding pally, and that goes for a strength or dexterity build. At level 1, all paladins will also gain two special class actions, the first one being Lay on Hands, which is a single target melee heal, or it can serve as an antitoxin / cure disease. Lay on Hands costs an action, and it also costs Lay on Hands charges, which are represented by this box right here. By the time you reach level 4, you'll have 4 total charges per short or long rest. Now, the amount of HP that you can heal for with Lay on Hands will also increase as you level up. And at current early access max level of 5, you'll be able to heal for either 10 hit points, which costs 1 Lay on Hands charge, or you can spend 2 of your charges for a larger 20 hit point heal. The second class action is called Divine Sense, which can actually be really good as it only costs your bonus action, which means you can cast it and deal damage in the same turn. Divine Sense will give your pally advantage on attack rolls against celestials, fiends, and undead. This will last for 2 turns and it recharges on a short rest. So whenever you're facing enemies that fall into any of those 3 categories, and don't be afraid to right-click on your opponents to examine them, it only costs a bonus action to give yourself a really powerful buff against them, so try not to forget that you have it. Moving on to ability scores, the 3 primary abilities to focus on for most paladins are Strength, Charisma, and Constitution. A higher Strength modifier will help you land more weapon strikes, and also allow you to deal more damage with your weapon. Taking into account that paladins are not primary spellcasters, your weapon is a very important part of your arsenal. Not to mention that many of the paladin's strongest magical abilities require your paladin to first land a melee strike, so strength for many builds is the most important. If you want to be a dexterity paladin, of course replace dexterity with strength. Charisma is important because it's your paladin's spellcasting ability. A higher charisma modifier will make your overall spellcasting more powerful, meaning that spells will be more likely to land and affect enemies, some spells will deal more damage, and some will heal for more. A higher charisma modifier also allows you to prepare more spells. Constitution is important as it directly affects your hit points, and pallies do tend to take a lot of hits, as they're typically on the front lines. A higher Constitution modifier will also make your paladin able to hold concentration spells much better, and paladins do have quite a few concentration spells in their spell list. Now, since I'm not doing specific builds in this video, I'll just give some general advice for assigning your points. I'd say the most important thing for most paladins is getting your strength, or possibly dexterity, to at least 16 in character creation, and then you can focus on charisma and constitution, with both of them being at a minimum of 14, I would say. But if you can get one of them to 16, then you have a really good paladin combat build. The rest of your ability scores are more so up to you. I usually tend to give wisdom a little extra love because paladins do naturally have wisdom saving throw proficiency, and I like to further their specialization in that aspect. So now that you know what ability scores are typically the most important for the Paladin, let's see what races offer the best optimization. Half-elves are hands down one of the best choices for the Pally, as you get a +2 to Charisma, and you can then choose a +1 to Strength and Constitution, or substitute the Strength for Dexterity. Shield Dwarves get a +2 to Strength and Constitution. Humans, of course, have a +1 to all ability scores. The Githyanki race gives you a +2 to Strength, along with a +1 to Intelligence. And last but not least, we have the Zerial Tieflings, which get a +1 to Strength and a +2 to Charisma. All of those races will at the very least allow you to get that +3 modifier in Strength right away in character creation. I should point out that the races that I mentioned that offer a +2 in Strength, which is the Shield Dwarf and the Githyanki, do allow you to get to a 17 ability score in character creation, which is still a +3 modifier because modifiers only increase on even numbers. But if you know the game well, you may be familiar with a situation that will give you a free +1, or should I say somewhat free +1 to your Strength, which would boost you to 18, and then when you hit level 4, you can add 2 more points to Strength, giving you a 20 with a +5 modifier. Very, very deadly, and I'll put that spoiler down below in the read more in the pinned comment. If you're going to go the Dexterity Paladin route, you'll be looking for a race that offers at least a +1 to Dexterity. And well, there's a ton of races that offer this, but for the Paladin, the ones that stand out, I would say, are Half-Elves, Drow, both sub-races of the Halfling and the Human. Please keep in mind that these are just recommendations for optimization, but you can really play whatever you want and make it work. Now, your subclass choice also gives you something at level 1, but let's go over the general Paladin progression to level 5 first, and then to end the video, I'll go over all 3 subclasses. At level 2, Paladins unlock their spell slots, gaining access to the Paladin spell list. Paladins use prepared spells, which means that you have access to all of the Paladin spells pertaining to your level, and you can swap these spells in and out whenever you want outside of combat. So don't stress out too much over which spells you need to prepare at this time. These are not permanent choices. Before we get into all of the prepared spells, I think we have to talk about the quintessential Paladin spell called Divine Smite. Divine Smite is a spell that is used alongside your Weapon Strike, and it allows you to deal extra radiant damage to a target when you land a successful hit. When you reach level 5, you can upcast Divine Smite for a total of 3d8 radiant damage to your target, and keep in mind, this is on top of your weapons damage. Divine Smite is a bit different from other spells because it's prepared at all times, and you also have the ability to alter your agency over its use. You can have it automatically go off when you land a strike. You can have it never go off. You can have the game present to you a pop-up box asking you if you want to use it when you do land a successful weapon strike. And you can even have it only go off when you land a critical hit. To control all of this, go to your reactions menu, which is right here on your character sheet. If you leave all of the boxes unchecked, Divine Smite will never go off, and you'll do just a regular weapon attack. If you did want to use Divine Smite and you had nothing checked off here, you actually have to click on the Divine Strike spell icon to use it, and then that will automatically do a weapon strike along with Divine Smite. But if you miss, it actually won't use up your spell slot for Divine Smite. If you check the first box, that will turn Divine Smite on, and when you strike an enemy with your weapon's attack action, if that attack lands, Divine Smite will automatically go off every time as long as you have a spell slot available. Now, if you don't want it to always go off on every successful melee weapon strike, which is understandable because Pallies are very limited in spell slots, and you don't necessarily always want to or need to use it, simply click on the little ask box right here. And now, when you use your weapon's attack action, your melee weapon's attack action, if your attack lands, a pop-up box will appear in front of you asking you if you want to also use Divine Smite. This next box allows you to have Divine Smite automatically go off on a critical hit if you so choose, or to have it ask you on a critical hit. A critical hit with Divine Smite means double weapon damage and double Divine Smite damage at the cost of just one spell slot. It's insanely powerful and probably best used on more powerful enemies that have a ton of hit points. When you reach level 5, you'll get these next 2 rows, which are for the same thing, except giving you control over upcasting Divine Smite as a level 2 spell, which of course means more damage potential. For me, I just turn on everything with, of course, checking the ask box in each row, and this gives me ultimate control over its use. Moving on to the general Paladin spells that you get access to at level 2. If you have a +3 modifier in Charisma, you'll be able to prepare 5 spells at this time. It's important to keep in mind that 9 out of these 11 spells that you're getting access to here are concentration spells, and you can only concentrate on one concentration spell at a time. So take a close look at them and see what type of paladin that you want to be, and then I'd say prepare 1 or 2 that sound like they really fit your build. For example, if you're going to be more of a support type paladin, you're probably looking at preparing Bless, Heroism, or Shield of Faith. And then I'd say prepare 1 more concentration spell that checks a different category, so you at least have it available for situational use should the need arise for you to step a little out of your party's role. The one spell that's a little weak here in its current state, but I think it's just a bug or maybe even just a mistake, is Divine Favor, as it currently only lasts for 3 turns of concentration, but in D&D 5th edition you get that extra 1d4 radiant damage per weapon attack for up to 10 turns. The non-concentration spells are Cure Wounds, which is a melee ranged heal, and Thunderous Smite. In my opinion, both of these spells can be excellent spells to have prepared, especially considering that they don't wrestle with your concentration spells. I do have to point out, though, that in D&D, Thunderous Smite does require concentration, so it's possible that Larian accidentally left this out of the spell's mechanics and it may be implemented in the future. As for Cure Wounds, it's never a bad idea to have a heal handy, and Thunderous Smite should not be overlooked here, especially in its current non-concentration state, as it's not only just extra damage on top of your weapon's damage, but you can also use it alongside Divine Smite. You can use the other smites along with Divine Smite as well, but Thunderous Smite does more single turn damage and it doesn't require concentration. So yes, if you land a Thunderous Smite, you get your weapon's damage, you get the 2d6 thunder damage, and you can then also have Divine Smite go off, which gives you extra radiant damage. Thunderous Smite also causes your opponent to do a strength saving throw, and if they fail, they'll be pushed back 10 feet and knocked prone, which can be very powerful. So Thunderous Smite offers a way to get crazy single turn damage when combined with Divine Smite. And we've not even talked about what happens when you get to level 5 and gain extra attack. Now, I will say though, that if you do want more damage over the course of an entire combat encounter, saving your spell slot for more Divine Smites and not using it up for a Thunderous Smite may be a better idea. But if you really want to go all in on one turn and do an absolute massive amount of damage, I say go for it. Alongside gaining spellcasting, paladins also get to choose a fighting style at level 2, and your choice here will of course depend on your particular build. For your damage focus, two-handed wielding paladins, great weapon fighting is of course a great pick here, as it minimizes your low damage rolls by allowing your damage die to be re-rolled if you roll a measly 1 or 2. As you can see right here in the combat log, my paladin with this fighting style must have rolled a 1 or 2, and then the game tells you that it was re-rolled and now he rolled an 8, which is much better of course. For more tank-focused characters, choosing defense gives you a permanent +1 increase to your armor class, which is a pretty big deal. This is a great fighting style for pretty much any type of paladin. Dueling, not to be confused with dual wielding, is typically for sword and board paladins that may care more about damage, as it will give you a +2 to your damage rolls with your weapon as long as you don't have another weapon in your offhand. And the last choice is the protection fighting style, which allows you, at the cost of your reaction, to impose disadvantage on an enemy who attacks one of your allies when you're within 5 feet of them. Probably a less popular choice here as it's a situational fighting style, but I'm sure that some of you could make good use of it. Maybe you're playing a paladin whose sole mission is to stay near another character and protect them at all costs. And like I mentioned earlier, for dual wielding, there is no two-weapon fighting style here for paladins who are dual wielding. So if you're a dual wielder, you're probably looking at defense being your best option here. Level 3 is mostly focused on subclass specific benefits, and I'll get into that soon, but all paladins do gain another level 1 spell slot, bringing your level 1 spell slots up to 3 per long rest. All paladins also gain divine health, which prevents them from being able to become diseased, and you should also be able to prepare 1 more spell than you could have before. Level 4 is where it can get really interesting, because you can either increase 1 ability by 2 or 2 ability scores by 1 each. Or you can forego that and take your pick of a feat. Doing ability score improvements is pretty much never a bad idea though, especially at this level, as getting your strength or your dexterity to 18 with that +4 modifier is huge. Or perhaps you have two primary abilities that were odd numbers, so increasing them each by 1 to get the modifier improvement on both can be very helpful. However, feats can be really strong, and perhaps even more importantly, they can be a hell of a lot of fun. If you're a two-handed wielding damage-focused paladin and you already have your strength to at least 16, I would say, Great Weapon Master can be an absolutely insane feat to take. The main thing that Great Weapon Master does is it gives you a +10 to your damage rolls at the cost of a -5 to your attack rolls when you're using a heavy melee weapon, but this can be toggled on and off. This can offer some crazy damage potential when you take into account the smites that you can also do and extra attack at level 5. I would say though, only take this if you have a decent understanding of how to offset that -5 a little bit, which can be done through things such as gaining advantage on your attacks and also using spells such as Bless. I should also mention that if you make a critical hit with Great Weapon Master toggled on, you get to make another attack as a bonus action. So think about the damage potential when you're, when you're a paladin that's level 5, and you can do your weapon attack with +10 damage combined with Divine Smite radiant damage, then do extra attack with that +10 damage combined with Divine Smite once again. If you happen to get a critical hit on one of those weapon strikes, you will get double weapon damage and double smite damage, and then you also get a bonus attack for getting that critical hit, which will give you another weapon strike at the cost of your bonus action, and that weapon strike will have a +10 damage from Great Weapon Master combined with another Divine Smite, which is pretty crazy damage potential. There's some other cool feats, such as the Dual Wielder feat, which will give you a +1 to your armor class when dual wielding, and also allow you to now dual wield 2 one-handed weapons that don't have the light property, which means more damage potential for you. Now we're starting to get a little bit more into specific builds though, so I'll leave it at that for this video. Just know that you can't really go wrong with increasing your ability scores. If you are enjoying this video and finding value in it, I do appreciate you considering hitting that subscribe button. There's much more Baldur's Gate 3 content to come. At level 5, Paladins gain 2 level 2 spell slots, which of course means you now have access to level 2 spells. There's 5 general Paladin class spells that will be added to your list at this level that you can now prepare. The more support type spells are Aid, Lesser Restoration, and Protection from Poison. Magic Weapon is a concentration, offensive type buff that gives a weapon of your choice a +1 to its attack and damage rolls, which is pretty costly for a level 2 spell slot. But with that said, the selling point of this spell I think is more so that it's supposed to allow your now magical weapon to be able to overcome enemies or objects that may be resistant or immune to physical damage. But unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be working right now. Branding Smite is another smite that gives you extra radiant damage to your attack, but it does require concentration, and its damage is not as powerful as Divine Smite, which also doesn't require concentration. The selling point for Branding Smite is that if you're facing an enemy that can turn invisible, Branding Smite, if successfully landed, will prevent an opponent from turning invisible for up to 10 turns. Level 5, of course, also brings with it a huge power boost, and that is the extra attack feature. Now, when you use your weapon's attack action, you can make an additional weapon attack. And this is great for all the classes that get it, but it's especially powerful for the Paladin, as you can now Divine Smite on both of those attacks. And you could even throw Thunderous Smite in there on the first weapon attack to get even more damage on that particular turn. And speaking of a power boost, at this level you also get another level 1 spell slot and a level 2 spell slot. But the rest of the features that you gain at level 5 are more so subclass specific features, so let's head back to character creation and now get into the Paladin subclasses. Unlike in D&D 5th edition, in BG3 right away in character creation is when you get to choose your Paladin subclass, with the choices being Oath of Devotion and Oath of the Ancients. There's also another subclass in early access called the Oathbreaker Paladin, but you actually have to break your oath to unlock that one. I should also mention the Oath of Vengeance subclass, but this one is currently missing from the game, but I'm almost certain that we will be seeing it on official launch. Your subclass choice is going to give your Paladin access to some oath-specific spells that will be prepared at all times, meaning you never have to choose to select or deselect them on your spell list. They're always available for use if you have a spell slot, of course. These oath spells are represented with a blue outline in your spell list. You never have to prepare them. The only thing you need to do is just mess around with where you want them on the hotbar. Your subclass choice also gives you some spells that are powered by what Larian calls oath charges. In early access, all paladins will have just one oath charge to use per short or long rest, and your oath charges are represented by this little box right next to the lay on hands box. Your number of oath charges will not increase until level 6, which we don't currently have access to in early access. Also, a quick tip in case you're unaware, you can click on the channel oath charge box right here, and it will show you what spells you have that use up your oath charge, and you can do this with pretty much everything on the user interface here: actions, bonus actions, and the lay on hands spell. Unlike with the other classes, paying attention to your Paladin's subclass description can actually be really important in helping ensure that you don't break your oath. But I should point out that the oath-breaking aspect of the game seems to be a little wacky in its current state, so just be sure to save a lot as you go because you may not agree with the causation of your oath breaking. Since we're on the subject, let's take a minute to talk about what happens to you if you do break your oath. So let's say that you decide to kill a good NPC that hasn't done anything to you yet. What will happen is you will immediately lose access to your oath charge spells, but you'll still have access to the general Paladin spells. When you end up going back to your camp, you'll be met with an Oathbreaker Paladin who will tell you that you need to pay 2,000 gold to restore your oath to regain access to your subclass features. Or you actually might consider embarking on the path of the Oathbreaker, which is its own subclass with its own special features. I'll get into those features here soon. There's several other ways that you can end up breaking your oath, but attacking non-hostile NPCs and lying in dialogue by using deception seem to be the two big ones. This definitely still needs some tweaking, so make sure to save a lot because sometimes you won't feel like it makes sense when you break your oath, and maybe Larian can even consider giving us like a Paladin oath book that we can reference. Oath of Devotion Paladins are your Knights in Shining Armor Protector type Paladins. They act with honor and virtue to protect the weak and pursue the greater good. At level 1, Devotion Paladins gain a channel oath spell called Holy Rebuke, which costs an action and your oath charge. You can cast Holy Rebuke on an ally up to 60 feet away, and this will grant them an aura that will deal 1d4 damage to enemies that attack that ally with a melee attack, and that is radiant damage. It's not really the best spell, and considering that it uses up your valuable oath charge, I don't know if I'm really ever going to use this, but I guess if you have an ally that's far away that's getting hit by like 5 enemies at one time, you can help them out. Or if you're facing enemies that are vulnerable to radiant damage. When you reach level 3, Devotion Paladins gain 2 more class actions that require your oath charge. The first one being Sacred Weapon, which costs an action and an oath charge, and using this will turn your main hand weapon into a sacred weapon, which makes it so that your charisma modifier will now be added to your attack rolls made with that weapon. So let's say you're using a two-handed weapon, your strength and charisma modifiers are now both added to your attack rolls for a duration of 10 turns, and there's no concentration required for this one. It's a very powerful feature, and even better if you cast it right before a combat encounter begins. Keep in mind that this is for attack rolls, not damage rolls. This makes it exceptionally good for paladins that are running the Great Weapon Master feat that need to offset that -5. I should also mention that your weapon will also emit light, so it's really good for those darker areas. The other class action is called Turn the Unholy, which costs an action and an oath charge, and it can only be used on fiends and undead. Has a 30-foot radius, and using it will cause your opponents to do a wisdom saving throw. And if they fail, they'll be turned by you, which means that they'll be forced to run away from you and not able to take actions, reactions, or bonus actions for up to 3 turns. It's a great crowd control spell for any larger combat encounters that have a lot of fiends and undead. The Devotion Paladin also gets the Protection from Evil spell prepared at all times. This is a spell that costs a spell slot and concentration. Using this on yourself or an ally will make it so that the target can't be charmed, frightened, or possessed when facing against aberrations, celestials, elementals, fays, fiends, and undead. And perhaps even more importantly, it gives those creatures disadvantage when they attack the target that has Protection from Evil active. Not a bad situational spell to at least have handy. And the other spell that will be prepared at all times, which is also not a spell on the core Paladin spell list, is called Sanctuary. Sanctuary costs a spell slot and a bonus action, and it has a range of 60 feet. And what it does is ward yourself or an ally against enemy attacks for up to 10 turns. The cool thing is that it doesn't require concentration. The catch, though, is that Sanctuary will end if the affected creature attacks or harms another creature. This would be a great spell to cast on someone that you really need to protect or keep alive, perhaps an innocent NPC that you really care about, or you could even cast it on yourself or someone else in your party whose sole purpose in the particular situation that you're in is to heal and hold concentration on certain non-harmful concentration spells such as Bless. As you can see right here, I cast Sanctuary on one of my party members who's not only healing the party, but also concentrating on Bless. It's an interesting way to make use of this spell. At level 5, Devotion Paladins get 2 more spells that will be prepared at all times. The first one is Lesser Restoration, which removes a disease or a condition, such as being blinded, and it costs a level 2 spell slot and an action. All Paladins do end up learning this spell, but Devotion Paladins don't have to worry about preparing it. And the Silence spell, which is not on the core Paladin spell list, Silence costs an action and a level 2 spell slot, and it also requires concentration. And what it does is create a sphere that causes targets within to lose their ability to cast spells. And it also makes targets within the sphere immune to thunder damage. The only time I really find good use for this spell in combat situations is in smaller corridors where enemies can't easily step out of the sphere. There's also some interesting utility situations where you can use this spell, such as if you have to break down a wall but you don't want to make a lot of noise, cast the Silent Sphere over the wall, break the wall, and nobody will hear you. Both of the Ancient Paladins are your nature-loving druid-like paladins. They fight on the side of light in the cosmic struggle against darkness to preserve the sanctity of life and the beauty of nature. If you do something such as kill an innocent animal, your oath will be broken. At level 1, Ancient Paladins get a class action called Healing Radiance, which is actually a very powerful AoE heal. Healing Radiance costs your oath charge and just a bonus action, and the heal has a 10-foot radius from the caster. When you reach level 5, this heal will do up to 15 HP per ally. And at the start of your next turn, it will also automatically proc off another 15 per target heal. It's a very, very good heal, especially for parties that fight in close quarters to each other. At level 3, the Oath Charge spells for the Ancient Paladins are Nature's Wrath and Turn the Faithless. Nature's Wrath costs an action and an Oath Charge and has a 10-foot radius. And what it does is cause the target to do a strength saving throw, and if they fail, they become restrained for up to 10 turns. Restrained targets cannot move, and attack rolls against them will have advantage, while their own attack rolls will have disadvantage. If you're fighting a low-strength, high-hit point enemy, this spell can be pretty powerful, especially considering that it doesn't cost concentration. Just keep in mind, you only get 1 Oath Charge per short rest or long rest, so using it on Nature's Wrath, I'm not sure if that's always going to be the right call, maybe in some situations. Turn the Faithless is similar to Turn the Unholy, which the Devotion Paladin gets, but instead of turning fiends and undead, it turns fiends and fey if they fail their wisdom save. At level 5, Ancient Paladins get 2 amazing druid spells that will be prepared at all times, and these spells are Misty Step and Moonbeam. Most of you are familiar with Misty Step up to this point. It's an amazing level 2 spell that allows you to teleport up to 60 feet away, the cost of a bonus action in the spell slot. And Moonbeam is a level 2 concentration spell that calls down a beam of moonlight that deals 2d10 radiant damage to any creature that enters the beam or starts their turn in the beam. The great thing about this spell is that it can hit multiple targets if they're grouped up closely, and you can move the beam at just the cost of an action. It will not cost you another spell slot. And the last subclass available in early access is, of course, the Oathbreaker. And to unlock this subclass, a paladin must break their oath. Once you break your oath, your character will hear a voice in their head, and the next time you go to your camp, you'll meet the Oathbreaker Knight, who will allow you to become an Oathbreaker. If you don't want to become an Oathbreaker, you can pay 2,000 gold to him to restore your former oath. If you don't have 2,000 gold, you can press on in the game, you just won't have oath charge spells until you restore your oath or become an Oathbreaker. Many of you will become Oathbreakers at different periods in time, so let's just talk about everything that you have once you reach level 5 as an Oathbreaker. So level 5 Oathbreakers will have 3 Oath Charge spells, just like the other subclasses. The first one is called Spiteful Suffering, which has a range of 10 feet and costs an action and an Oath Charge. If you cast this on a target and the target fails a Charisma save, it'll take 1d4 plus your Charisma modifier necrotic damage for up to 3 turns. I'd say even more importantly, attack rolls against that creature will have advantage. The coolest Oath Charge spell, although very situational, is called Control Undead, and this spell has a 20-foot radius and costs an action and an Oath Charge. Control Undead works, of course, only on undead creatures, and these undead also have to be a lower level than you. And what it does is cause an undead to do a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, they'll then stop fighting you and instead follow you around and attack your enemies. Your undead creature can stay with you all the way until you take a long rest. Control Undead will likely be much more useful when the full game comes out and we get into more situations with undead creatures that are actually lower level than we are. And also I should mention that Paladins will be able to animate the dead when they get to a higher level. They just don't get access to that spell in early access like the Wizard and the Cleric do. And the last Oath Charge spell is called Dreadful Aspect, which has a 30-foot radius and costs an action and an Oath Charge. Dreadful Aspect is an AoE frighten spell, and all enemies within its radius will be forced to do a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, they become frightened for up to 10 turns. Frightened creatures can't move, and they have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Definitely found some good use for this one when fighting large mobs of enemies. The spells that the Oathbreaker gets access to that are prepared at all times include Hellish Rebuke, which is a reaction spell that can be used with a level 1 or level 2 spell slot. If you have this one active or on a setting where you want the pop-up box to appear because it's a reaction, the next time that you take damage, you'll also surround your enemy in flames, dealing 3d10 fire damage if using a level 2 spell slot. Keep in mind, though, that your opponent will be doing a dexterity saving throw, and if they succeed, they'll only take half damage. As a Paladin, I really only find great use out of this one when I'm up against opponents that are vulnerable to fire damage. Otherwise, I'd like to use my spell slot for a different spell. Inflict Wounds is a cleric spell, but the Oathbreaker Paladin gets it as well, and this one is a melee range spell that deals up to 4d10 necrotic damage if cast as a level 2 spell. It's a pretty powerful spell, but keep in mind your damage potential with your regular weapon attack plus extra attack and divine smite. Oathbreakers also get Crown of Madness and Darkness at level 5. Crown of Madness is a level 2 concentration spell that has a 60-foot range. And if an enemy fails a wisdom save, they will then go mad and attack the creature closest to them other than you. And Darkness is a level 2 spell that has a 60-foot range and a 17-foot radius, where it will create a cloud of magical darkness that heavily obscures and blinds creatures within. So if you're not going to play a goody two-shoes Paladin, you're probably going to be forced down the Oathbreaker path, which is fine, and they get some pretty cool spells, especially at higher levels. And that'll be it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and let me know below in the comments if you're interested in some actual Paladin build guides. I have a few in mind that I can do that are pretty deadly. Catch you on the next one.